The chipped mug felt warm in my hands, the cheap ceramic barely holding the heat of the instant coffee. Outside, the November sky was the color of slate, promising a rain that hadn't quite decided to fall. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the same scarred oak table where my wife Laura and I had shared thousands of meals, debated bills, helped our son with homework that seemed a lifetime ago. Now, silence was the main course. It had started subtly, or maybe I'd just been blind. Laura had always been vibrant, the life of any gathering. Lately, though, her energy felt different, directed outward, away from me, away from the quiet rhythm of our 23 years together. More late nights attributed to work deadlines I never heard discussed before, hushed phone calls she'd take in the other room, a sudden intense interest in fitness classes she'd previously scoffed at. I'd told myself it was a phase, maybe midlife restlessness. I'd tried suggesting weekends away, date nights like we used to have, but she always had a reason to decline. Tired, busy, a friend needed her. The real jolt came not from a dramatic confrontation, but from a quiet observation. Last Saturday, she'd come home late from a supposed girls' night out, smelling faintly of rain and a cologne I didn't recognize. She'd been animated, cheeks flushed, talking a mile a minute about silly gossip and wine, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. She'd tossed her coat over the back of the chair in the hallway, something she never did. Laura was meticulously neat. Later that night, unable to sleep, the image of that coat snagged in my mind. I slipped out of bed, the floorboards cool beneath my feet. In the dim hallway light, I picked it up, intending to hang it properly. That's when I saw it, tucked deep into the inside pocket, almost hidden beneath the lining. A single earring. It wasn't expensive. A simple silver hoop, smaller than the dangly artistic things Laura favored. More importantly, it wasn't hers. I knew her jewelry. I'd bought most of it over the years. My hand closed around the small, cool piece of metal. It felt alien, wrong. My first thought, absurdly, was that maybe she found it. Maybe it belonged to her friend, Patricia. But the way it was tucked away, almost secretively, no, that wasn't it. A cold certainty washed over me, starting in my gut and spreading outwards, making my fingers numb. This wasn't found. This was forgotten, left behind. I stood there in the silent hallway, the earring pressing into my palm. The house felt suddenly vast and unfamiliar around me. The rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the living room, usually comforting sound, now seemed to be counting down the seconds to something unavoidable. I looked towards our bedroom door where Laura slept, oblivious, or perhaps not oblivious at all, perhaps perfectly aware of the small silver betrayal nestled in her coat pocket. My breath hitched. It wasn't just an earring, it was a symbol, a piece of evidence dropped carelessly into the placid surface of the life I thought I knew, sending ripples of doubt and suspicion widening across everything. The late nights, the hushed calls, the distance, they clicked into place with a sickening clarity. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being paranoid. Something was fundamentally broken. I didn't confront her then. What would I say? Whose earring is this? I could already picture her easy deflection, the wave of her hand, the plausible explanation that would make me feel small and foolish for asking. No, this required something else. Quiet observation, confirmation. The architect in me, the part that needed blueprints and solid foundations, demanded proof before acknowledging the building was compromised. I slipped the earring into my own pocket, hung up the coat, and went back to bed. Lying beside Laura, her breathing soft and even, felt like lying next to a stranger. Her familiar scent was now overlaid with the ghost of that other cologne, a phantom presence in our room. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced, replaying conversations, expressions, moments I'd dismissed. Had she looked different after that conference last month? Was the overtime pay really matching the hours she claimed? Every memory seemed tainted now, viewed through the lens of this cold, hard piece of silver in my pocket. The foundation I'd spent more than 2 decades building felt like it was crumbling under my feet, and I hadn't even heard the first crack. The coffee in my mug was cold now, bitter, just like the taste in my mouth. I needed to know, not for revenge, not even for confrontation, but for certainty, for the simple, brutal truth. The days that followed were lived under a strange, heavy glass. I moved through the routines of our life, work, meals, meaningless small talk about the weather or the overflowing recycling bin, but felt disconnected, an observer in my own home. I watched Laura. I watched the way her thumb hovered over her phone screen when a notification buzzed, the quick, almost imperceptible glance she'd give it before deciding whether to open it immediately or wait until I wasn't looking. I noticed how her laughter, once aimed mostly at me, or shared moments, now seemed reserved for whoever was on the other end of her frequent calls, her back turned slightly, her voice lower, more intimate. She mentioned needing to work late again on Tuesday. "Big project deadline, Mark," she'd said, ruffling our son Tom's hair as he hunched over his laptop at the table. "Don't wait up." Mark, not honey or love like she used to use, even casually, just Mark. It felt clinical, distant. I nodded, forcing a neutral expression. "Okay, need me to save you dinner?" She waved a dismissive hand. "No, don't worry about it. We'll probably order in." We. The casual plural stung more than I expected. I tried to push the earring incident out of my mind, tried to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she'd borrowed the coat from her friend Beverly, and the earring was hers. Maybe it had fallen from someone else's bag at the restaurant where the girls supposedly were. My logical mind desperately sought these escape routes, but my gut remained stubbornly anchored to the cold certainty that had gripped me in the hallway that night. One evening, I found myself sorting through old photo albums, ostensibly looking for a picture Tom needed for a school project. Flipping through the gauzy pages, I saw us younger, happier. Our wedding day, Laura radiant, her eyes fixed only on me. Holidays, birthdays, vacations at the beach, Tom growing from a chubby toddler into a lanky teenager. Each image was a pang, a reminder of the shared history I now suspected was built on a foundation riddled with hidden cracks. Was her smile genuine in that picture from our anniversary dinner last year? Or was she already thinking of someone else, even then? The past, once a source of comfort, now felt like a field of potential landmines. My work suffered. I'd stare blankly at spreadsheets, the numbers blurring together. I made mistakes, forgot meetings. My boss, David, a decent man I'd known for years, pulled me aside. "Everything okay, Mark? You seem preoccupied." I mumbled something about stress at home, Tom's college applications, the usual pressures. He clapped me on the shoulder, accepting the half-truth, but his concerned gaze lingered. The urge to snoop felt demeaning, a violation of the trust I thought we shared. but the need to know gnawed at me relentlessly. One afternoon, while Laura was supposedly at her new yoga class, I found her tablet lying on the coffee table. My heart hammered against my ribs. I picked it up, my fingers trembling slightly. It was unlocked. I hesitated. This felt like crossing a line, stepping into a darkness I might not be able to handle. But the image of the silver earring, the memory of her distant gaze, pushed me forward. I opened her messages, my breath caught. There were threads deleted, gaps in conversations that felt deliberate, but she hadn't been thorough enough. Scrolling back weeks, then months, I found them. Messages exchanged with a name I didn't recognize, Daniel. Not overtly incriminating at first glance, mostly logistical. Running late. Meet you there? Can't talk now. But the frequency, the timming coinciding with her late nights and unexplained absences, painted a clear picture. Then I saw it. A short exchange from about 6 weeks ago. Daniel, tonight was amazing, Laura. It always is. Wish I didn't have to go home. Daniel, soon, soon. The word hung there, heavy with implication. My stomach churned. It wasn't just a flirtation, not just emotional distance. This was real, physical, ongoing, amazing. The casual intimacy of their words felt like a physical blow. I felt sick, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I closed the tablet, placing it exactly where I'd found it. The house seemed unnaturally quiet, amplifying the frantic pounding in my chest. I walked to the window, staring out at the gray, drizzly street without really seeing it. The confirmation wasn't a relief. It was a heavy, suffocating weight. The ambiguity was gone, replaced by the stark, ugly truth. Laura, my wife of 23 years, the mother of my son, was living a double life, and the life she shared with me felt like the lie. I thought about the earring again. Daniel's? Did he give it to her, or did it belong to someone else entirely? Another layer of deception I hadn't even considered. The possibilities felt endless, nauseating. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway startled me. Laura. She was early. Her yoga class must have finished sooner than expected. I stood, frozen by the window, my mind racing. Confront her? Stay silent? What was the next step? The foundation hadn't just cracked, it had shattered. I could see the pieces lying around me, sharp and irreparable. She walked in, shaking raindrops from her coat, calling out cheerfully, "Mark, I'm home." Her voice, usually a sound I welcomed, now grated against my raw nerves. I turned slowly from the window, my face, I imagined, a mask of forced neutrality, but inside a storm was raging. The world had tilted on its axis, and the ground beneath my feet felt terrifyingly unstable. She stopped in the hallway, noticing my stillness, my expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, her cheerful demeanor faltering slightly, a flicker of caution entering her eyes. My mouth felt dry, the words caught in my throat. All the carefully constructed scenarios, the imagined confrontations, evaporated. There was only the raw, pulsing wound of betrayal, and the sickening weight of the truth sitting between us. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the chasm that had just ripped open in the middle of our living room. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I could feel the careful neutrality of my expression begin to crumble, the shock and pain finally breaking through. It was over. Everything. Numbness spread through me, Holden, complete. I finally found my voice, though it sounded distant, raspy, like it belonged to someone else. "I know, Laura." Just 3 words, quiet in the stillness of the hallway, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. Her face, which had been shifting from cautious curiosity to practiced innocence, instantly crumpled. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin looking papery, thin. "No?" she echoed, her voice barely a whisper. "Know what, Mark? What are you talking about?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell or accuse. The anger was there, a cold, hard knot in my chest, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of exhaustion, of finality. I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the small, cool curve of the silver hoop earring. I pulled it out and held it flat on my palm, extending my hand slightly towards her, her eyes fixed on it. Recognition flared instantly, followed by sheer panic. She took an involuntary step back, her hand flying to her mouth. Where did you get that?" "Your coat pocket," I said, my voice still unnervingly calm. "Last Saturday night, after your girls' night out." She stared at the earring, then at me, her mind clearly racing, searching for an escape route, a plausible lie. I found that," she stammered, avoiding my gaze, "on the floor at the restaurant. I meant to ask Beverly if it was hers." The lie was so flimsy, so insulting in its transparency. It was the final confirmation that the woman standing before me was capable of looking me straight in the eye and attempting to rewrite reality. "Stop it, Laura," I said, the coldness in my voice finally hardening into something sharper. "Just stop. I saw the messages. Daniel." Her name hung in the air between us, heavy and damning. This time, there was no denial, no attempt at deflection. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes filling with tears. Whether of guilt, regret, or simply the terror of being caught, I couldn't tell. Didn't care. She looked utterly broken, but it didn't evoke pity in me anymore, only a vast, hollow ache. "Mark, she began, reaching a hand towards me, her expression pleading. I recoiled instinctively, pulling my hand back as if her touch might burn. The gesture was small, almost involuntary, but it spoke volumes. It was a physical manifestation of the chasm that now separated us, wider and deeper than any physical distance. Seeing my reaction, her hand dropped, her face contorting. I couldn't stand there looking at her anymore. Couldn't bear the sight of the life we'd built dissolving into this ugly, tear-streaked mess. Without another word, I turned and walked away, moving past her down the hallway towards my small study at the back of the house. I didn't slam the door, just closed it quietly behind me, the click of the latch echoing the finality of the moment. The room was dim, filled with the familiar scent of old books and lemon polish. I sank into the worn leather armchair, the one I always sat in to read or think. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading, leaving behind a profound bone-deep weariness. I stared at the opposite wall, at a framed photograph taken years ago. Us, younger, smiling, holding a much smaller Tom between us on a sunny beach. It felt like looking at ghosts, the trust, the shared intimacy, the belief in our future, all gone, shattered by a silver hoop earring and a few carelessly typed messages. 23 years, more than half my life dedicated to this marriage, to this family, to her. Had any of it been real? How long had this been going on? The messages mentioned 6 weeks. But Daniel, who knew how long he, or possibly others, had been a part of her life? The not knowing felt like a separate kind of torment. My mind flashed to Tom, upstairs, probably absorbed in his video games, oblivious to the earthquake that had just ripped through the foundation of his world. How would I tell him? How could I explain that the life he knew, the parents he trusted, was built on a lie? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. The silence from the rest of the house was unnerving. Laura hadn't followed me. Was she crying in the hallway, calling Daniel, packing a bag? Part of me wanted to storm back out there, demand answers, unleash the fury coiling inside me. But another, larger part just felt empty, drained. Like the fight had gone out of me before it even began. What now? Lawyers? Separation? Selling the house? The logistics felt overwhelming, unreal. All I could feel was the crushing weight of betrayal, the sting of humiliation, and a grief so profound it felt like a physical cavity in my chest. The future I'd always envisioned, growing old with Laura, watching Tom build his own life, quiet evenings side by side, had vanished in an instant. I leaned my head back against the cool leather, closing my eyes. The image of Laura's panicked face, the glint of the earring on my palm, the casual cruelty of Daniel's messages, it all swirled in my mind, a sickening vortex of pain and disillusionment. The life I knew was over. The quiet ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece filled the room. Each second felt like a drop of water wearing away stone, eroding the remnants of what we once were. There was no going back, no fixing this. There was only the wreckage, hollow. That's all I felt. Utterly, devastatingly hollow. I sat there for what felt like hours, though the clock on the mantelpiece showed only 20 minutes had passed. The house beyond the study door remained eerily quiet. No sobbing, no shouting, no frantic phone calls, just silence. It was somehow worse than a confrontation would have been. It felt like abandonment, like she had simply accepted the end without a fight, without even the decency of trying to explain or express remorse beyond the initial panicked tears. My mind kept replaying the scene in the hallway, the sight of the earring, the collapse of her composure, the instinctive way I recoiled from her touch. That recoil felt significant, final. It wasn't planned. It was pure visceral rejection. The trust had been so completely pulverized that physical proximity felt repulsive. My gaze drifted around the small room. Bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with novels I'd loved, histories I'd studied, biographies that now seemed pointless. On the desk sat a framed photo of Tom, grinning widely after scoring the winning goal in a soccer match years ago. His innocence, his unawareness of the fault line running beneath his feet, felt like a physical weight on my chest. Protecting him had always been my primary instinct. Now, how could I protect him from this? The truth would hurt him, shatter his image of his mother, perhaps even of me for not seeing it sooner, for not stopping it. But lying, pretending everything was normal, that felt like a different kind of betrayal, poisoning the trust between father and son. I heard footsteps upstairs. Tom. Moving around his room, the muffled thud of music starting up. He was plugged into his own world, safe for now. But the clock was ticking on that too. Soon he'd come downstairs looking for dinner or asking about homework, and he would sense the suffocating tension in the air. Kids always knew. He would see the rift between Laura and me, even if he didn't understand its cause immediately. Then I heard softer footsteps in the hallway outside the study. Slow, hesitant pacing, back and forth. Laura. She hadn't left. She was out there, trapped in the same silent limbo as I was, but on the other side of the door. What was she thinking? Was she trying to muster the courage to knock, to plead her case? Or was she simply paralyzed, unable to face the consequences? A faint scraping sound, like a bag being dragged across the wooden floor. Was she packing? The thought sent a strange mix of relief and fresh pain through me. Relief that maybe the decision was being taken out of my hands, that the agonizing process of separation was beginning. Pain that she could discard 23 years so readily, packing her life into suitcases while I sat numbly in the wreckage. The pacing stopped. Silence again. Then a soft tap on the door. "Mark?" Her voice was low, tentative, stripped of its earlier panic, now just sounding lost. I didn't answer. I couldn't. What was there to say? There were no words left that could bridge the gap between us. Anything she offered now, apologies, excuses, explanations, would feel like dust, meaningless in the face of the fundamental breach. "Mark, please," she tried again, her voice cracking slightly. "Can we just talk for a minute?" Talk? We hadn't really talked in months, maybe years. We'd exchanged information, coordinated schedules, maintained the facade of a partnership, but the real conversations, the ones grounded in honesty and vulnerability, had vanished long before I found that earring. Her version of talking now would likely be damage control, attempts to minimize, to explain away, to perhaps even shift blame. I wasn't interested. I remained silent, staring at the grain of the wooden door, imagining her standing just inches away on the other side. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations and irreparable damage. Finally, after another long moment, I heard her sigh, a ragged, defeated sound. The footsteps retreated, moving towards the front of the house this time. The front door opened, then closed with a soft, final click. She was gone. Whether she was gone for good or just for the night, I didn't know. But the definitive sound of that door closing felt like punctuation. An end stop on a chapter I never thought would conclude this way. I was alone in the house, save for Tom upstairs. The weight of that settled on me. Alone with the broken pieces, the unanswered questions, the sickening certainty of betrayal. Alone with the knowledge that my life had irrevocably changed. I needed to get out, not run away, but just breathe air that didn't feel contaminated by lies and secrets. I stood up, my legs stiff. I glanced again at the photo of Tom. Telling him would be the hardest part, but it had to be done. He deserved the truth, however painful. My hand rested on the doorknob of the study. Outside this room lay the rest of my life, a landscape suddenly unfamiliar and daunting. I had no map, no plan, just the cold, hard knowledge of where I stood now. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob. The immediate path was unclear, shrouded in the fog of shock and grief. But standing still, hiding in the wreckage, wasn't an option. The first step was just to move, forward, into whatever came next. The weight in my chest felt immense, a physical ache. Opening the study door felt like breaking the surface after being submerged. The air in the hallway seemed thick, charged with the residue of Laura's panic and departure. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, accusatory. I walked towards the staircase, my feet leaden. Each step up felt like an ascent towards an unavoidable precipice. Tom's music was still playing, a rhythmic beat pulsing faintly through his closed door. Usually, I'd tell him to turn it down. Tonight, the sound felt like a flimsy shield, protecting him from the harsh reality waiting just outside his room. My hand hovered over the doorknob. How do you start a conversation that detonates your child's world? How do you deliver news that will irrevocably alter his perception of his family, his mother, his life? There was no easy way. No gentle phrasing could soften this blow. Delaying it felt cowardly, like leaving him adrift in a sea of unspoken tension he would inevitably sense. He deserved the truth from me, his father, before whispers or assumptions could poison his understanding. Taking another deep, unsteadying breath, I knocked lightly. "Tom, can I come in for a sec?" The music volume dipped slightly. "Yeah, Dad, sure." I pushed the door open. He was sitting at his desk, headphones askew on his head, scrolling through something on his computer screen. The usual teenage clutter surrounded him: textbooks, crumpled papers, an empty snack bowl. He glanced up, a casual question in his eyes, but it quickly shifted to concern as he took in my expression. I must have looked as wrecked as I felt. "Hey," he said, pulling off his headphones completely. "Everything okay? You look weird." I forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Yeah, buddy. Well, no, not really." I walked further into the room, closing the door softly behind me, shutting out the rest of the fractured house. I perched awkwardly on the edge of his bed, the mattress dipping under my weight. My hands clasped together between my knees, trying to stop their slight tremor. "What's going on?" Tom asked, swiveling his desk chair to face me fully now, his attention sharp, his brow furrowed. "Is it about college apps? Did something happen at work?" "No, nothing like that," I said, my voice low. I met his gaze, his eyes so much like Laura's, yet filled with an uncomplicated trust that twisted the knife in my gut. It's about Mom and me." His face tensed slightly. He knew on some level that things hadn't been right between us. He'd seen the strained silences, the avoided glances, but he couldn't have imagined this. "What about you guys?" he asked, his voice cautious. I opened my mouth, searching for the words, the least damaging sequence. How do you phrase betrayal? How do you explain the inexplicable failure of the two people he relied on most? "Your mom, she won't be staying here anymore, Tom." His confusion was immediate, stark. "What? Why? Did you guys have a fight? Where did she go?" The questions tumbled out, innocent, logical, hitting me like tiny darts. I looked down at my tightly clasped hands, then forced myself to look back at my son, my only son, whose world was about to break. "It's more complicated than a fight," I started, the words feeling thick and clumsy on my tongue. Sometimes people make choices that mean things have to change. Your mom made some choices. The difficulty of it, the weight of his innocent eyes watching me, waiting for an explanation I could barely comprehend myself, was suffocating. This moment felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, needing to jump but terrified of the fall. Pain, sharp and immediate, lodging itself right under my ribs. "Choices?" Tom repeated, the word hanging between us, heavy with dawning dread. "What choices?" He leaned forward slightly, his knuckles white where he gripped the arms of his chair. "Dad, what did she do?" I couldn't bring myself to say the word. Infidelity. Affair. It felt too crude, too brutal to throw at him like that. Instead, I focused on the impact, the consequence. She chose to break the promises she made to me, Tom, the promises that hold a marriage together. She was dishonest. My voice cracked on the last word. Tom stared at me, his young face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and then a dawning wounded understanding that was agonizing to watch. He shook his head slowly, as if trying to physically dislodge the information. No, no, Mom wouldn't. Are you sure? Yes, I said, the single word costing me more than I could have imagined. I'm sure. That's why she left tonight. He looked away then, his gaze dropping to the floor, his shoulders slumping. The silence in the room was suddenly immense, filled only by the faint, tinny beat still leaking from his discarded headphones. He didn't cry, not yet, but the rigid set of his jaw, the way he clenched his fists in his lap, spoke of a dam holding back a flood of emotion. So, that's it? He asked finally, his voice rough, muffled. She's just gone? I don't know about gone for good, I admitted, feeling the inadequacy of my own uncertainty. But she's gone from here, and things are going to be different now. He didn't respond, just kept staring at the floorboards as if they held some answer. Watching him retreat into himself, mirroring the way I had retreated in the study just moments before, felt like another kind of failure. I had told him the truth, but the fallout, the shrapnel from the explosion, was just beginning to hit. The air felt thick with his silent pain, heavy with the weight of irreversible change. My own grief felt secondary now, eclipsed by the need to anchor him, to be the solid ground he needed when everything else was crumbling. This raw, shared moment of fracture, it felt like the beginning of a long, painful road,